Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show.
कब आई है एक्ट? आपको तो ये भी नहीं पता, पढ़ते लिखते हैं नहीं, पता नहीं कौन से मदरसे से कौन सी पढ़ाई करके आए, यहाँ पे कानून के ऊपर बहस करते हैं। कहाँ से ले आए अपनी लॉ की डिग्री, बताइएगा आप। तो आपके लिए औरंगजेब इतना जरूरी है? अगर आपको लगता है औरंगजेब ने गलती करी है तो मानिए और छोड़िए जगह। आप भी तो दिखा दीजिए ना कि आप सच में हिंदू पक्ष के भाई हैं।
These were a few clips of BJP's national spokesperson Nupur Sharma appearing on television debates over the years. On Sunday, Sharma was suspended from the party because of the derogatory comments she made about Prophet Mohammad. Now, on that same day, the BJP also expelled its Delhi spokesperson Naveen Kumar Jindal because of his anti-Islamic statements. And both these decisions came after three countries in the Gulf region, Qatar, Kuwait and Iran, summoned the Indian ambassadors to register their protest against these statements and demanded a public apology from India. And later on, other Islamic nations like the UAE and Maldives also criticized the statements. And this is a big deal because India has had historic ties with these nations, and it trades with them very frequently. In this episode, we talk about how this controversy started, its implications, and what people within the BJP make of it. And for this, we first speak to Indian Express's Krishn Kaushilk. Krishn, could you begin by telling us how this controversy actually started?
So this controversy regarding, the criticism from many Gulf countries about the comments made by certain BJP leaders started when two BJP spokespersons, one Nupur Sharma, who's a national spokesperson for the party, and another Naveen Kumar Jindal, who's a spokesperson for the Delhi unit. Both of them made certain comments last week regarding Prophet Mohammad. Sharma made the comments in a TV news debate, and a few days later, Jindal made similar comments on Twitter. Both those comments were considered derogatory against Prophet Mohammad and hurt the feelings of several people, including many Muslims who live in India. However, the controversy did not become international at that point. At that point, there were certain voices within the country who asked for action to be taken against these two, but nothing was done, neither by the party nor by the government. However, over the weekend, the tweet and the recording and the comments by Sharma were picked up by people living within the Gulf region. There are several countries over there. Most of them are Islamic nations, and they account for about 20% of the world's Islamic population. So once these comments were picked up over there, including by the Grand Mufti of Oman, it became a much bigger deal. So first on Sunday, countries like Qatar, Kuwait and Iran, all of which are considered quite close to India, they summoned the Indian ambassadors to those countries to register the protest. The statements issued by Qatar and Kuwait also said that they wanted India to publicly apologize. While this was happening, of course, there were particular hashtags that had started trending in those countries, largely in the entire region, to be honest. And while some of those hashtags attacked Prime Minister Narendra Modi, asking because it was leaders from his party who had made those comments, there were other hashtags that asked for boycotting of Indian goods in those countries. So it became a huge problem. Now you have to understand about more than 6.5 million Indians, non-resident Indians, live in the Gulf region. In many of these countries, the Indians are the largest expat population. So there was also a threat that, if action is not taken or if action is not seen to be taken, there could be a potential threat to the security of at least some of those Indians who live in that region.
Right. So these Indian ambassadors were summoned by Kuwait, Qatar and Iran on Sunday. And after that, more countries joined in to criticize these statements. What were some of these countries?
So this included Saudi Arabia, another close ally of India. The next day it included UAE, very close to India. It included Maldives, where India has a massive influence and, we have very close relations. It also included Indonesia, which is actually the country with the largest Muslim population in the world. Comments also came from Pakistan, an organization for Islamic cooperation, which has 57 members globally. However, India's tricky relationship with the organization and Pakistan meant that, India issued severe responses to them. So this is where the controversy began. This is where it largely is at the moment.
And Krishn, could you talk about how big of a deal it is to summon ambassadors of another country? Like, how often does something like this happen between two nations?
So that's an interesting question. So what really happens is it depends completely upon the nature of relationship between the two countries for such a step to be taken. Usually, India and Pakistan, which nobody has any doubts have a very adversarial relationship. Such incidents are quite common where, India summons the top envoy of Pakistan in the country and, register their protest about anything that has happened, anything they haven't liked that Pakistan has done. And so does Pakistan. So between adversarial nations, these things happen. However, for this to happen with countries like Iran and Qatar, which are both extremely close to India, with Iran, India has had centuries of, close relationship with Qatar. It is one of the closest strategic partners India has in the Gulf region, and it's the largest supplier of imported natural gas to India. For this to happen in these kind of countries, it clearly is a diplomatic embarrassment. This was definitely avoidable. And interestingly, the démarche in Qatar happened at a time when India's Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu was visiting Qatar. He was in Doha on the same day when this happened. So clearly it's a much bigger diplomatic embarrassment, diplomatic situation. Of course, both the countries have a lot of diplomatic engagement. There are many issues that are discussed. They are discussed at the ambassador level. They are discussed behind closed doors. They are discussed in meetings, with the ministers or other diplomats. But to make it public, to announce it publicly that yes, we have summoned the envoy to the country to register our protest, it's definitely a major, let's say, escalation in expressing the displeasure with the country.
And what was India's reaction to this summoning and the statements that were issued by many of these Islamic nations?
So again, interestingly, India's reaction was different compared to who was reacting. Like India did not react to all the statements or all the démarches that happened. But a statement by Indian Embassy in Doha, which is in Qatar, it did mention that yes, the Indian ambassador met the Qatar government, and it categorically stated that the comments made by Sharma and Jindal do not represent the views of the Indian government or the ideology of the Indian government. It also called them the comments from the fringe elements. But again, that's a debatable point. Nupur Sharma is the national spokesperson for the BJP. BJP is a ruling party. Jindal was a spokesperson for Delhi unit of the BJP as well. And plus, Nupur Sharma is followed by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is followed by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh on Twitter. So it's debatable whether you want to call them fringe elements or not, but that's how India tried to dissociate itself, at least on the official platforms. It did not really react to almost any other statement or any other, démarches, barring two more, which was one was a statement by OIC and the other was a statement by Pakistan. Towards Pakistan, India said that it's ironic that a country like Pakistan is creating issues about the situation of minorities in India, given Pakistan's own track record of how it deals with minorities, example, the Ahmadiyyas. India mentioned that. For OIC, India said, that OIC should not be, misdirected by vested interests, which was a veiled attack again on Pakistan. So India's reactions were pretty sharp when it came to both OIC and to Pakistan. But that's given the history that India has reacted sharply to statements from both these organizations and countries. Honestly, in the past, as earlier this year, when the hijab controversy was happening in Karnataka, there was a statement by OIC, and India had reacted in a similar manner back then as well. But barring these two, India hasn't reacted even to statements from Maldives, which is so close to India.
And Krishn, India has had strong ties with many of these countries that have now spoken out against these controversial statements. Could you tell us the significance these countries have for India, especially those in the Gulf region?
Definitely. With each of these countries independently and the region put together, India has extremely, extremely close ties. And the basis of those ties can be three-pronged. One is the number of NRIs, the non-resident Indians who live there, who also send massive amount of remittances back home. Second, the trade and energy needs of India. UAE, for example, is India's third largest trade partner globally. When talking about just imports and just exports, the country stands second. But, in cumulative value, it's still the third largest trading partner for India. Saudi Arabia is the fourth largest trading partner for India. India relies heavily on Qatar for its natural gas needs. 40% of our imported gas comes from Qatar. About 17 to 18% of our crude oil comes from Saudi Arabia. We have more than 65 lakh people living in this region. And, most of them are not PIOs, which are, they do still retain their Indian citizenship. They have the Indian passport and they send massive amounts of remittances back home. To go by World Bank figures, in 2020, India received remittances worth 83 billion. That's almost double of the second country in that ranking, which is Mexico. Mexico got about 42 billion of remittances. And RBI's reports show that, 50% of all remittances that India gets back, they come from the Gulf region. So clearly the relationship between India and the entire region go very, very deep. India and Iran have got historic relationship. India used to import a lot of oil from Iran, crude oil, but that has stopped over the past few years because of the sanctions on Iran by the US. So the significance of the region can be based on all these aspects. But the point is, I do not believe that this incident will cause a major diplomatic hurdle It is just a minor embarrassment, and countries will hopefully move forward from this. But yes, the significance still remains. And if these such things escalate, it can become a problem for India.
Now, at a time when this controversy has been talked about across the globe, it is important to consider its implications and how it could affect Indians living in these Islamic countries. When we spoke to Indian Express's national editor of strategic affairs, Nirupama Subramanian, she first pointed out that similar incidents have happened in the past as well.
Earlier also there have been several incidents where Muslims have been targeted in this country, and there has been some resonance, especially in the last 2-3 years, when some people living in the Gulf region have made remarks against Muslims, or when the Tablighi Jamaat controversy came up, when the government held them responsible for being a COVID super spreader. And there was some controversy in the Gulf also. It had some ripples were felt in the Gulf. Some influential people in the Gulf region criticized India for saying this. But, mostly India has been able to tide over these incidents by projecting them as domestic matters. And I think both sides have been content to actually accept that and move on. For instance, even during the Babri Masjid demolition, there were ripples, but I think there was also the feeling that India is the country whose foundations in secularism, in plurality, in democratic traditions, these are all strong traditions in India, and India can take this blow and move on.
But she says that this time, the BJP's national spokesperson attacking the Prophet Mohammad, for Gulf leaders and especially the Gulf religious leaders, it was like a red line had been crossed.
And also, this is the first time that the people who said it are directly linked to the government in power. They were the spokespersons of the BJP. They are the face of the ruling party on television. They defend the ruling party on television. So it was a direct link to the government. So I think that is what has really upset so many countries, where people have been sending in their condemnation. Some have demanded an apology and so on.
Though talking about the implications, Nirupama agrees with Krishn that this controversy would not really affect the bilateral relations between India and these countries. And this is because we really do have strong ties when it comes to trade and economy.
But at the level of people-to-people contacts, I think what is being feared is that there might be some fallout. In terms of, the first thing might be in jobs. That is a concern, that employers may not want to hire Indians anymore because they may not want to end up hiring people who speak against Islam. And they have no ways of checking who speaks against Islam, who doesn't, who's a fundamentalist, who doesn't. So they'll just go slow on that kind of hiring. And this is one ex-diplomat who I spoke to, Talmiz Ahmed. He has been our ambassador in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and in Oman as well. And he told me that there was a time when there were more when there was a bigger Pakistani workforce than an Indian workforce. This was in the early 80s. But then what happened was that Pakistan became known as as a country where there were lots of extremist elements. There were all these extremist groups that were roaming free in Pakistan. And employers in the Gulf did not want to do anything with this kind of extremism. So they've started going slow on hiring Pakistanis, and Indians filled that gap. And that was when they started hiring more Indians. So he was saying that if there is going to be an immediate implication, it might be in this fear.
And this is what the fear is right now, that over 6.5 million Indians in these countries could face repercussions. Plus, she says that this has really hurt India's image in these countries. And this has happened at a time when other countries in the West have also raised similar concerns in the recent past.
Just last week, the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said that there were concerns about restrictions on freedom of religion and freedom of worship in India. So the world is seized of the fact that there is a problem in India. But the irony is that India hit out at the US for saying that. And India actually said that the Biden administration is indulging in vote bank politics by coming out with something like this. But in the case of the Gulf, it has been very cautious. It has gone the opposite way. It has deferred to their objections. It immediately sacked the two persons who were responsible for these comments, distanced the government, distanced the party from these two people, said they were fringe elements. So India went to some lengths to protect these relationships. And I think that is for several reasons. One is, because of the diaspora, because of our other relationships that have been built over time. But I think there is a general feeling in the world that India has slipped on these matters. India has slipped on its secularism. India has slipped on its democracy indicators. All those things are, I think, rather well known in the world. And yeah, to that extent, India's reputation has taken some kind of a beating across the world too.
So far, we have talked about how the controversy started and what its implications could be. But now we talk about the thinking within the BJP. Now, like mentioned earlier, the BJP took action against Nupur Sharma and Naveen Jindal only after it got pressure from the Gulf nations, more than a week after they had originally made the statements. When Indian Express's Liz Matthew, who reports on the BJP for the paper, questioned leaders within the BJP about it, they made excuses that didn't exactly pass muster.
The BJP leaders, when I was asking them why it took so long for the party to react to it, their explanation was very, in fact, I'm taking the freedom to use the word lame, that, we were busy with the Garib Kalyan, that fortnight-long program for the 8th anniversary focusing on Garib Kalyan. This was their reaction. But any sensible person would know that such kind of an action came, or the direction for such an action came from the top, right from the Prime Minister's level, and it was conveyed to the party leadership, and the party immediately took a stand like that.
In fact, sources within the BJP told her that until a letter came from the top leadership, they had no idea that this action would be taken.
So we know, if you just look at like what they say, the chronology, we know that it is very clear that it is not because of their shock hearing Nupur Sharma talking like that on television. It is more because the kind of reaction they never expected, because they got away in the past with so many other things, whether it was hijab issue, whether it was in UP, whatever happened, which was termed as anti-Muslim measures. They just got away with everything.
But this time, because it caught the attention of the Gulf countries, they had to do something about it. Though Liz does point out that in the past, the party has taken action against its members. Like the party secretary of BJP's J&K unit, Vikram Randhawa, was dropped from all positions after he made anti-Islamic remarks last year. And MP Pragya Thakur was removed from the Defense Committee for her remarks praising Nathuram Godse. But this is the first time that such a prominent face, like Nupur Sharma, who regularly appears on TV, has been suspended. But there are people within the party who are still defending Nupur Sharma, saying that what she said was only a reaction to what another person said during the TV debate.
According to one spokesperson, he was saying that, we go as party soldiers. We are the soldiers of the party there. We try to defend the party line. We try to promote the party's agenda. But sometimes in the heated debates, it happens that, somebody says something and we are also human beings, we react. But such an action against Nupur Sharma was not really welcome, sincerely. In their heart, they don't welcome it. I'm talking about among the young spokespersons of the party. But at the same time, they say that when the party takes a decision, we have to follow, because discipline is very important in the BJP establishment, they say. So it's not so pleasant for either the party or for the members that such an action was taken. There is resentment, but obviously knowing BJP, it will just remain as under the cover only.
She says it's unlikely anyone will publicly come out and say that they disagree with the decision. Now, during the controversy, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi tweeted, quote, "Divided internally, India becomes weak externally. BJP's shameful bigotry has not only isolated us, but also damaged India's standing globally," unquote. Similarly, a few other opposition leaders also took to criticizing the ruling party. But Liz points out that it doesn't really seem that the opposition is up in the arms about this issue.
It could be also because when the India is under attack, the Indian government, whichever party is India is under attack, I have a feeling that for the opposition parties also there is a limit to which they can actually attack the government on this matter. And here in this case, the government and the party have the defense of can always have the justification of we took action now against those people who are responsible. So what else we can do? That is the BJP's defense here. And no matter how much we boast and claim about what we have gained. Somebody whom I was talking to today morning was saying she with 2 lines demolished everything India has made for last 20 years in the diplomatic side with this Arab world. Those lines may be an exaggeration because we know that it happens in the diplomatic world, but the damage is already been done.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.